Hi everyone, I'm Alicia and I'm the Education Manager for Texas and for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. And I want to welcome you to our second in our webinar series, Beyond the Diagnosis, How to Navigate the Physical, Emotional, and Medical Impact of Living with a Chronic Illness. I will get it. And we're delighted to welcome back Nicole Williams to give us the second part of this presentation. So yay. Little quick intro to Nicole. She is a licensed professional counselor practicing in Central Austin, received her bachelor's degree in education from Mount St. Mary's in Maryland and her master's in counseling from St. Edward's University in Austin. And she's trained in social and emotional intelligence coaching and assessment and trust-based relational intervention and EFT, emotional freedom technique. So all really awesome things. And you specialize in working with children, teens, and adults on trauma, attachment, grief, and loss, and chronic illnesses. So we're really excited to have you back again. We had such great comments about your last one. So I'm excited to turn it over to you. I'm going to take myself off camera. You're going to talk, and then I'm going to come back and ask you questions here at the end.
Perfect. Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slideshow screen. Bear with me just a moment. There we go. Well, thank you, Alicia, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you everyone who is joining us here today. As Alicia shared, I am a private therapist here in Austin, Texas, but just as important, I am a chronic illness warrior myself. My journey started when I was 18, and although I would like to say that was just a few years ago, my back reminds me daily it has been a few decades in the past. And along those decades, while learning how to manage my chronic illness, I discovered something really important, and that was that mental health support and care is just as vital to my treatment as were the medications, the supplements, and the surgeries or procedures. But what I also understood and learned was that this was not always readily available. So I am deeply honored and excited to be part of this changing conversation, which brings us to today's focus. Physical impact. As Alicia mentioned, this is part 2 of the webinar series, and I highly encourage you, if you have the time, to take a look at the previous one. It was focused on the emotional impact of a diagnosis. Please explore the ideas and strategies there and take what resonates with you. So tonight, when we look at the physical impact of chronic illness, we are going to pay particular attention to the nervous system. We're going to learn how they are intricately tied together, how they affect each other, as well as how a chronic illness influences our relationship with a medical community. It is no longer, when we go to visit a physician, a quick fix. You're not going in for a sprained ankle or a quick physical. This is a changing relationship that will require a lot of understanding about communication and self-advocacy. We're going to spend some time learning about those this evening. We're also going to take some time looking at varying strategies to be able to maintain a calming regulation spot in our nervous system, meaning staying in a more restful state. One of these strategies is going to be meditation. Let me pass this one. Meditation activates a part of our nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. Fancy word for meaning just a more restful state. When we meditate, it helps us to slow down our heart rate, our breathing rate, our blood pressure, and helps release and process stress hormones if they have been activated. We're going to talk a lot about stress hormones a little later on. So to begin our webinar, I would like to share an example of a guided meditation. If you are new to meditation, there are many forms and ways to do it. Today, my goal is just to allow you to experience one way, which is voice guided. If you are like me and you have a very active mind, I considered myself for a long time a failed meditator. I would stare at the candle and I would put the music on, and then I would promptly make my to-do list or create my grocery list in my head. Finding voice-guided meditation was extremely helpful for keeping me focused and back in the present. I use a lot of meditations that use 5 senses in the imagery because evoking all of our senses allows us to anchor that feeling and experience of calm in a much deeper way. I'm going to talk a little bit more, so I'm going to bookmark this, idea and fact for a little bit later on in our conversation. As with anything though, your experience will be very personal. Safety is my first priority for you. So if at any time during the meditation you feel uncomfortable, I would like you to stop, open your eyes, ground yourself by verbalizing the day, time, and room that you're in, and perhaps recalling the last activity you did. Take a moment to breathe, and then wait for our meditation to be completed. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started by getting in a comfortable position in a place where you can focus on my voice and let worries and distractions pass you by. We're going to begin by concentrating on our breath. Whenever we have a moment of anxiousness or stress, oftentimes we will take a deep breath in. We've been hearing that since we were little, right? Take a deep breath in and calm down. And in the history of calming down, no one has ever become more calm by being told to calm down. So in actually taking that deep breath in, we're actually giving our body more oxygen, which makes it actually become more activated, not less activated. So we're going to start with 3-6 breathing, meaning breathe in through your nose for a count of 3 and out slowly through your mouth for a count of 6. So breathe in for 3, out slowly for 6. In for 3, out for 6. Continue breathing in for 3, out for 6. And as this continued pattern of breathing moves on, become aware of the rise and fall of your chest with each inhale and each exhale. In and out like the rise and fall of an ocean wave. As you become aware that your breath is much like the rise and fall of the ocean, begin to let your imagination wander. When you close your eyes, I want you to begin to visualize that you are sitting in a sailboat on a beautiful sunny day. As you begin to take the sailboat in with your eyes, you start to feel its gentle swaying back and forth with the motion of each wave. Begin to take the sailboat in with all of your senses. Feel the sides beneath your hand. Is it made of wood or metal? Is it warm or cool to the touch? Can you feel the paint? Feel it in the color, or actually look at the sail, taking its color and its movement in the wind. Using all of your senses to take in the surroundings, feeling the wind through your hair. Hearing it gently flapping against the sail. Smell the salt air in the sun. Smell the salt air and feel the sun on your skin. Hear the sound of the waves against the side of the boat. Are there any seagulls nearby? Today feels like the perfect temperature. It's not too hot or too cold. And this gentle rocking of the boat is lulling you into a deep calm. With each breath, inhale and exhale, your shoulders start to release and sag. The muscles around your core starts to unwind. The muscles around your eyes soften, your jaw relaxes, and your neck eases. And as you continue to absorb this scene, you notice far off in the distance a tall, solid, beautiful lighthouse. And as you peer at that lighthouse, a feeling of calm and safety washes over you. You wish to travel there, and you gently pick up the oars in the boat, feeling how heavy they are, if they are smooth, cool to the touch. Begin to row deep in that water, noticing with what great ease you are moving towards the shore. Feel the water splash up on your hands, feel its coolness and the salt that lingers. With each moment you get closer and closer to the lighthouse, your body becomes more and more relaxed. You feel centered and grounded. Your breathing slows. Your heart rate slows. As you are approaching the shore, you notice that when you look down into the water, you can see the sandy bottom. You are feeling safe and calm as your boat gently slides up onto the beach. You anchor your boat in there for it to be there when you return. You gently step out of the boat, feeling the sand beneath your feet. is warm and grainy. You look around as you see the sun shining off the beach and the water washing up gently and then drifting back out to sea. As you look at the lighthouse, you notice a stone path leading towards it, about 30 yards away. You begin to walk along the path, feeling the stones that are cool and smooth beneath your feet, hearing the wind rustle through the short grass on the sides of the beach. You still feel the sun warm on your face and smell the salty air in the wind. Feel your hair lift with each breeze. As you reach the lighthouse, you reach your hand out gently to touch its side. It is smooth and cool. You walk around the perimeter, feeling every angle, walking completely around it to return to the very front where you see the door to enter. As you reach out to the doorknob, you notice how cool it is to the touch. You gently open it and feel a release of any stress or worry that is remaining, knowing this is your safe place. You slowly open the door and walk in. In this lighthouse, it is filled with objects that bring you joy, comfort, warmth, and safety. Take a minute to walk around the inside and explore each object you see, gently touching or picking it up. Take it all in. Do you hear any sounds in the lighthouse? Are there any scents remaining? What is the temperature that you feel? Is there light filtering in through any of the windows? As you walk around, you notice a staircase leading to the top of the lighthouse, and you gently begin to climb. You notice at the top that the light is shining brightly from that lighthouse. It is a safe light. You reach out to touch it, and there is no warm sensation, burning sensation. This is a safe light. It completely encompasses all over your body, almost as if a warm liquid shield is covering you. And when this warm liquid shield covers you, you feel most at ease. You notice that any way that you move, the light completely covers you and continues to protect you. Your muscles continue to relax. Your breathing continues to slow, and you feel at ease and at peace. You begin to descend the stairs again and notice this light goes with you, this mysterious, comforting light. You are back in the main entrance of the lighthouse now, covered in your light-protected shield, seeing all of the objects that bring you comfort and joy. And know that you can return to this lighthouse and this feeling of safety and comfort at any time. All you need to do is simply close your eyes, begin your ocean breathing, and start your visualization. But now you know it's time to return to the boat and this present moment. You start to walk down past that path again, feeling the cool stones, the breeze, and the sun on your face. As you reach the boat, you know you will not be rowing back out to the ocean. You will be traveling back to the present space and time that you are in. You feel the boat beneath your hand, and as you step in, you become aware of your breathing. You become aware of any sounds in the room that you are in. You become aware of the time and day and your present moment. Become aware of the slide that is back on your screen. Take a breath in for 3. Pause and out for 6. Make sure you're wiggling your fingers and toes, blinking your eyes a few times, and come back to the present moment. If this meditation resonated with you, there are many of these on YouTube for free. I'm a huge proponent of free. If we have a health condition, we know that finances quickly pile up. I also recommend 3 particular apps: Calm, Headspace, and Stop, Breathe, Think. They also have free options for those as well. So now that we are all breathing a bit calmer, or maybe wishing that we were actually on a beach somewhere, and I apologize for that, we're going to go ahead and move forward with taking that close look at the physical impact, why it's important to understand the nervous system role. When we typically consider the physical impact of a diagnosis, we often stop at the side effects of medication, recovery of treatments and surgeries, or the impact of changes in our own physical abilities. And those also have emotional consequences as well, are extremely important to acknowledge and explore. But today I want to spend some time talking about another physical influence with chronic illness, and that's the difficult topic of trauma. Trauma is intricately linked with our nervous system and vice versa. And our nervous system is linked with both our immune and inflammatory responses, which is why it is so important to talk about. As we explore this idea, I want to break trauma into 2 different groups, just for this discussion. I want to acknowledge that trauma is trauma. There is no longer a belief that there is big trauma and little trauma. None can be compared, as each is experienced and processed uniquely to the individual. But for tonight, I want to look at the group of non-medical trauma and medical trauma. Looking at non-medical trauma will be important if you have experienced any of this in the past, currently, or possibly still being triggered by a trauma, to understand its impact on our nervous system so that we can then learn how to regulate that, to give our support if we are then also facing medical trauma. Non-medical trauma can be events experienced in the military, natural disasters, community violence, intimate partner abuse, verbal abuse, sexual assault, childhood neglect, abandonment, poverty, an experience with a parental figure or loved one with an addiction or mental illness, complex grief, loss of an attachment figure, loss of property and occupation. These are just to name a few. So how do we know there is a connection between trauma, the nervous system, and chronic illness? The CDC and Kaiser Permanente began a study in the late 90s, around 97 or 98, I believe. The ACE study, Adverse Childhood Events, which they looked at 10 types of trauma, many of which I just mentioned. This is also, I want to note, been expanded on today. This study also continues today. They looked at the impact of trauma on subjects throughout their entire lifetime. They found that 1 in 6 people have an ACE score of 4 or higher, meaning that out of those 10 trauma types, they'd experienced 4 of them before the age of 18. They also discovered that the higher the ACE score, the higher the percentage or possibility of having a long-term chronic health issue. More specifically, they found that for every 1 type of trauma experienced out of those 10, it raised the likelihood of having an autoimmune disease by 20%. So for those who had experienced 4 at least, it raised it by 80%. They found that if they experienced 2 or more, it increased the possibility of being hospitalized for that diagnosis by 70%. I also want to point out that they've done research on not only the ACE score, but a resiliency score as well, which is why this is important to talk about. If you have or are continuing to experience trauma, whether it is medical or non-medical, there are ways to help our nervous system so that we do not become one of those percentages. So that's why it's important to talk about how to manage our nervous system. If you are diagnosed with a chronic illness, does it mean you have a high ACE score? No. If you have a high ACE score, does it mean you will absolutely have a chronic illness? No. But the ACE scores and trauma, past or present, is important to be part of this conversation because it's important to talk about how to be proactive to help the impact on our health to be minimal. So when we talk about non-medical trauma, those are some of the examples. I want us to pause for a second and now take a look at what we may be experiencing as part of medical trauma. If you have had in the past or currently triggered by a past trauma or are currently in a traumatic situation, we know that this will impact our nervous system. If our nervous system already has a challenge to begin with, we'll need to understand then on how to mitigate it. Because on top of that, we may be feeling dysregulation when we are in pain from our chronic illness. If we are having a triggered reaction during a treatment, a procedure, or surgery based on a medical trauma as well. When we talk about medical trauma, we typically think about or focus on procedures and hospitalizations. And we are going to talk about those. But I also want us to take a look at experiences that at first glance we might not think are significant, but can be a trigger moving forward. We want to look at the very beginning, possibly even before there was a diagnosis. How were the symptoms that you were experiencing affecting you, having repercussions in your life? Did it impact your career or your occupation? Did it impact home life or your social life? Physical capabilities? Was it before the diagnosis possibly an emergent situation where one day things felt fine and the next day you're being rushed to an emergency room and now you're preparing for surgery? All of these moments in our life, which we're going to talk about later on, may be part of a fight, flight, or freeze reaction. We also want to talk about informed consent. Very important document and part of communicating with your medical team. It helps us to understand possible side effects and consequences to treatment, procedures, or surgeries. But I also want us to understand that it may be the first time we are looking in black and white at the possible life-altering complications and side effects of the diagnosis itself. It may be a new awareness that has lasting effects on our relationship with our body and our disease. The treatment plan. It can be physically painful. It can induce grief, increase fear, isolation, loss of physical capabilities, and if it is ineffective, it can also be extremely disappointing. Medication can be a traumatic experience with its side effects or possible ineffectiveness. The daily and often several times a day or weekly or monthly appointments can be a reminder also that life is not the same as it once was, no longer. It's the before the diagnosis and the after the diagnosis. Environments of the procedures, the surgical field, the waiting room, the treatment facility itself can all hold traumatic memories and triggers, just as we talk about the procedures and hospitalization. So you hear me saying that word a lot, right? Triggers. So what is a trigger and how does that dysregulate our body? Well, our body stores our memories, not as files, as if I'm going to think about my favorite day, or I'm going to think about this really difficult memory that I had. I'm going to pull it up in a file. But it stores our memories and our experiences in our senses. So a particular smell or sound, a time of year or color can send an alert to our body to a link to a past experience, even if it was pre-verbal, and our body goes into the same reaction that it did when we experienced that event. Whether it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, the sympathetic nervous system, or the calm state, the parasympathetic nervous system. So I want us to go back to that bookmark that we put in right before we did our meditation. And you remember I was using a lot of senses. The feel of the sun on your skin, the feel of the wind, the smell of the salt air. I used those because research tells us that our body cannot tell the difference, meaning it reacts the same way to a memory of an event as it doesn't actually experiencing it. So if we have a memory of an event that is wonderful and calming, so if I do that meditation over and over, if I think of the lighthouse, my body will automatically respond by moving to the parasympathetic nervous system, calming my breathing, my heart rate, and my blood pressure. If I have a traumatic event and that is triggered, my body immediately goes back into that stage of sympathetic nervous system, preparing me to fight, flight, or freeze. So the smell of rubbing alcohol, clank of a surgical instrument, sound of an IV pump, the anniversary of a hospitalization, even driving past the hospital or a doctor's office that's familiar to you on the way to a wonderful event can all be triggers to reactivate you into an emotional response state based in your sympathetic nervous system. And what that might look like if it is lower levels, so that we have two levels, right? We have that chronic stress, which we're going to talk about in just a second, which is the low level pieces. or you have those big triggers. If I smell rubbing alcohol and my body is triggered into severe fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, I might have the sweaty palms, the racing heart rate, the difficulty breathing, room feeling like it's closing in. Or I may have a low level, consistent, constant chronic stress. That is going to show up in sleep disturbances, changes in my memory and concentration, mood dysregulation, quicker to anger, quicker to be tearful, hypervigilance. Every feeling and sensation in my body is triggering me. Is this a symptom? Is this a flare? Anxiety and depression, exaggerated startle response, especially if you have one of the pieces for the ACE score that may be highly activated. If you are a low level, kind of simmering in that stress response in that sympathetic nervous system, we are scanning our environment consistently for stress. And so any sound, if we're on high alert, is going to give us that exaggerated startle response. It will impact our immune system and create a low-grade pro-inflammatory state. So the big question is how, though? So I'm hearing, if I stay in my sympathetic nervous system, it's impacting my immune system, but how are those two connected? We see that, the trauma connection, but the way they're connected is through stress hormones. Remember, I told you we're going to kind of talk a lot about those the rest of the afternoon. When we are activated into our fight, flight, or freeze mode, our stress hormones are then activated. That's this cortisol and our adrenaline is pumping through, right? It's to prepare our body for fight, flight, or freeze. It's a protective response, but it's only supposed to be for short periods of time. For example, it's bedtime, you're upstairs, you're snuggled in bed, and you hear a sound downstairs. It's unfamiliar. Immediately, your body sends out those stress hormones to give us more energy. It's to prepare your muscles for fight, flight, or freeze. Part of your brain kind of gets rerouted, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, to provide energy. So certain functions of your brain are not going as fast as they were. Then you hear your dog bark. And though you probably vow to yell at him later, there is a flood of relief, and your body immediately starts to process out those stress hormones through your other organs. If you are living with chronic stress, where you're being constantly triggered, we are maintaining that sympathetic nervous system. We don't have a chance to process our stress hormones. And that's when it shows up in things like anxiety and depression consistently, sleep disturbances, hypervigilance, sugar cravings, mood disturbances. With our sleep cycle disrupted, the repair-rest cycle and processing of those stress hormones is limited. We also know that with an increase of consistent cortisol, with its acidic nature, it can cause a breakdown of our lymphoid tissue, which is highly linked to our immune system and our inflammatory system. So how do we then not live in our sympathetic nervous system if we do have trauma of any kind? We often try to do so with control behavior, that rebel that is often triggered with trauma. And it might look like avoiding procedures, treatments, or medication compliance, use of substances, food, over, under exercising, avoiding family or friends, commitments, shutting down completely, binge watching. Behaviors that feel very comforting in the triggered moment, but do not address the nervous system itself. So we want to look at the way our body responds to a trigger and how to change that beforehand to be proactive, right? That's the best way to handle the trigger. We will talk about these things that you can do during the trigger, but most important way to lower it is before the trigger happens. So if we are walking around daily at a chronic stress level of 5 or 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most anxious and stressed you've ever been, and we have that low-grade mild sympathetic nervous system responses going on, anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, irritability. When we have a significant trigger, maybe being told that we do have to have a procedure or going into the procedure itself, we go beyond a 10. But what is more important about that is it's a very long time before we get back to a lower level. The longer we are in that sympathetic nervous system state with cortisol and adrenaline pumping, the more damage it does to our health. So we want to keep our daily numbers low at a 1 or 2. So doing the mindfulness, the moving and resting, supporting yourself through self-care is going to help us when we do have a trigger to maybe only go to a 5 or 6, and the recovery time will be shorter. Finding what works best for you is always the way to create your self-care guide. Mindfulness may be meditation for you, or it may be hiking in nature, listening to your favorite music, drawing, reading, whatever resonates and speaks to your calm and comforting joy, do more of that. Also, know your triggers. If you know them, you can prepare for them. Not always, but oftentimes you can. So if you know there's an anniversary coming up, if you know that you're going to be going into a procedure, doing those mindfulness exercises like guided imagery, progressive muscle relaxation, our 3-6 breathing consistently, a little tongue-tied, those will help your body prepare before you go. Taking a look at the ACE quiz on the CDC website and the resiliency quiz will give you more information, and information is powerful. Looking at those two, I want you to look at what is difficult for you, what was something that you experienced, without comparison of whether it should or should not be. Taking a look at your triggers, what is also difficult for you? Is it difficult to go into your physical therapy exercise? Is it difficult for you to go into a grocery store? Is it difficult for you to go and do a family gathering? To look at that without judgment or shame is very important. I am weak if I can't handle this treatment. It's negative self-talk. We want to reverse that, right? Or the talk of it could be so much worse, I can't complain. I could have this. Who am I to complain? I have insurance. I have a great support system. I can't be upset about this. I have to just pull myself up by my bootstraps. Who am I to be scared? I'm a man. I'm a grown person. I'm a soldier. Whatever that I am. I'm an athlete. We want to look at what is difficult for us in our life to really understand our triggers and then understand how to support ourselves through that. Because what we all are is a person living with a chronic illness. And that is a unique experience with no comparison possible, even if we have the exact same diagnosis. It is also our truth that this is a scary, difficult, life-altering event in our life, right? So this is not something that goes away. There is strength in allowing yourself to know that, right? That vulnerability piece. The next piece of this is move and rest. Listen to what your body needs, thinking of the activity and rest as another form of medication. Thinking of your body as a friend and not the one who's betraying you, which is very difficult. There are handouts from our last webinar that I'd highly recommend you downloading and using. They're journaling activities called Dear Body and Dear Illness. They can be used as a form of meditation, but they're a way to reconnect your body to you in a positive healing way, to look at yourself connected to your body and you being a team versus the illness. I also like to talk about the ABCs: advocacy, boundaries, and communication. To understand how to advocate for yourself and learn to communicate your needs, and this is the important part, without shame or guilt. Right? I'm a burden is often what I hear. So really understanding that it is okay to have a need and then how to communicate that. Boundaries are vital. Understanding what your body needs and when to say no. No is a complete sentence. No need to add anything to it. I'm sorry, or I wish I could. And when to say yes. It isn't an I can't phrase anymore. I want us to reframe that into an I choose. So yes, I can go to that party that I don't really want to because I feel bad about it. If I don't do that, what will they think? I'm going to be the sick person who flakes again, but I know I'm going to pay for it for 3 days. Or I can choose a different path. Because when I say no, I want to think about what I am saying yes to. Maybe having more energy for my hobbies, having more energy for my children, having more energy just to read the book that I've been loving lately and wanting to get through. More energy to take that walk around the lake that I've been looking at out the window for a while. If you say yes, it may also be a choice. That one concert that you've been waiting for 2 years to come to your city and it's there, and understand that that's going to take a toll on your energy level. It is a choice when it is about reframing that for boundaries, not flares. Oftentimes with flares, we don't have a choice. That is understood, and that causes frustration, and sadness and anger. When I'm talking about choice, I'm talking about the boundaries that we make. Next is our care plan. Oh, actually, before that, sorry, I skipped communication. Communication. We want to use our I statements. We want to be very clear with our purpose and without apology. My body is hurting. I need blank. My body is blank. I am asking for blank. Very clear communication. Now to the care plan. One way to help our nervous system is to find control in a way that is healthy, like being the team lead of your own care plan. We often think doctors are our lead, and I want to reframe that for us. They are part of our team. It is important to empower ourselves in managing our health. We are the head of that team. That can be overwhelming on the best of days. So I'm providing a quick packet that you can take and run with. Customize it for how it would work best for you. And in just a second, I'm going to pause this because I'm going to go ahead and show you the care packet. Okay, so our title here, just plain and simple, care plan. The first page is looking at a physical and mental piece of the care plan. Taking a look at how will I help my nervous system? Will it be through yoga, hiking, walking? Will it be through resistance training, biking? Because part of our movement helps us process those stress hormones as well. Looking at your goals. Again, these are goals that we want to set on a very personal level. If we do not meet those goals, they are not met with shame. It is met with, this is information gathering. If I wanted to do 3 days a week, but I was unable, what does that tell me? So I've also left a space for you to write your physical response. You could also add your emotional response as well. Another part of this self-care is your mental piece. Meditation, guided imagery, journaling, social support, and therapy. The next page in the care plan looks at question log. I highly recommend having someone go with you as part of your team, taking a look at a person who can help you if you have forgotten a question, or who can be the person who writes down the answers. Oftentimes we go into an appointment and the doctor is left and we walk away very frustrated because our questions weren't answered, but it may be because we didn't ask them, right? It's very overwhelming. There's a lot of information coming at us. So I highly recommend writing all of the questions down, keeping track of which physician and which appointment that you asked and that was answered, and the answer that was given. Oftentimes, since our illness is chronic, not going away, we have many years have gone past and we have a similar flare or symptom or something recurs, and this is a good way to keep track of what worked or did not work the last time. The next page is taking a look at a symptom and emotion tracker. This is very important. I highly recommend being your own historian. Oftentimes, again, we have very limited time with our physicians or our medical teams. We need to give them the most concise way of giving them information as we can. So this is a very quick symptom tracker. It's just 2 weeks at a time. You copy and make it front to back. I left a lot of blank spaces for you all to be able to write in your own symptoms, because again, everybody's illness is very unique to them. Did also put emotions on there as well, because it is also important to talk to your support group, your medical team, if you have a therapist, about the patterns and the state of the emotional piece for you. The next piece is the medical treatment plan that you are working with your physicians. Again, there's that historical piece of being able to write your timeline down. So it's with you, but it also can be copied and given to past or new physicians as well. There's a spot for you to write down your physicians and important information, procedures, supportive treatment if you are seeing a lymphatic massage doctor or an acupuncturist, and medications as well. And one of the last pieces, one of the most important, I feel, is the allies and support organizer. Really looking at the people who can be part of that medical team with you as the top part. This is that part of self-advocacy, which is really difficult because it's vulnerable. It is in reaching out and saying, I need support and assistance. Not saying I can't, or this is how we're going to look at choice. I can just bear with it and grin and bear it and do it myself. Or through choice, I can say, I am going to be a leader of a support team, right? So we want to look at nurturers, those people who we know are the people who can do the care calendars for us, right? The people who are great with helping with aftercare, errands, or family care if I have children or pets. The containers, those are our listeners, right? Those who can hold space for us with empathy and non-judgment and not advice if it's not needed or asked for, actually. The communicators, those who help with sharing important healthcare information to friends and family after procedures. The warriors, those are the ones who might attend appointments with us. They might be the note takers, the researchers, help with communicating needs and questions to the treatment team. The organizers help with managing insurance claims, record requests, research information, scheduling, travel if you, like most of us, maybe have moved and we still go back to see our doctor, or we found a doctor in another state or city. We all know how overwhelming insurance claims and medical records can be. This might be the person that kind of helps get it all together for you in a binder, which I highly recommend. And our guides, those who share a similar experience with us, or our support groups, our therapists, and our advocates. So bear with me again, guys. I'm going to go back to our other slideshow. There we go. So I want to take a look before we kind of wrap up with questions and resources. We have all of these support ideas. We have our care plan, we have some meditations, we have talk about how to advocate, but I still hear, but Nicole, I still find it difficult to self-advocate. So I want to talk about those obstacles to self-advocacy for just a minute. And I want to talk about something that I call the other white coat syndrome. That is, we know the white coat syndrome where they say we're nervous, or our blood pressure is raised, and our heart rate is up, and we'll often be told, well, that's white coat syndrome. We're nervous because we're in the appointment. There's another piece of a white coat syndrome, and that is, who am I? Who am I to have a question about the care plan that my doctor has set out for me? They are the expert. Absolutely. They are the expert in their field. And I want to be very clear about this. I want this to resonate. If you take away nothing this evening, you are the expert on your body. You are the expert on the way you feel the symptoms and feel the flares. You're an expert on the way that the medication makes you feel, the pain level of your surgery or the healing. That is your expert, and that is important, vital information. So that is where it needs to be, that team piece. So that is who you are. You are an expert on your body. The next thing to take a look at is doctor fatigue and have-to avoidance. It is, many of us have probably had several doctors, or especially if we have support physicians or support like acupuncture or lymphatic massage. Often our calendars are full of the have-tos. So oftentimes self-advocacy will look like, even though I'm having a flare or a symptom, or I know this would be beneficial to me, I'm going to avoid it. So my advice on that is, be aware of what that is for you. When that comes up, acknowledge it. This is my doctor fatigue. Give yourself a pause. Let yourself do something fun and joyful or self-care that day. Then go back and actually acknowledge that your body, like a friend, is in need of its medicine. That may be part of that have-to that you're avoiding. Another obstacle might be an unsuccessful past healthcare interaction. If you were dismissed, if pain was minimized, if there was some non-listening happening, if you were told, which often case unfortunately happens a lot, is your symptoms are only due to anxiety. There may be a resistance to opening up if there has been a unsuccessful or detrimental interaction. I want to acknowledge the pain of that, how difficult that is. Something I've experienced, many of my clients, or most of my clients have experienced that. There's a little bit of that medical trauma piece in there of not being heard and seen and listened to and validated. So I would like you to acknowledge that that is also something that has happened, and to acknowledge that every person that comes in contact with you is someone new. And then again, use your supports. Get that person who's going to come in there and help you with those questions and help advocate for you. Also would like you to research, there are advocacy groups. If you live in Austin, there is one called Advocate ATX. And they are people who are skilled in advocating and mediation, and they will actually go in and be that helpful person in the appointments with you. And just another resource idea. Some obstacles might be not understanding your rights and your goals. We don't utilize our allies or support resources. If we don't feel prepared, which I highly recommend doing those things that we talked about as the question log or the symptom tracker. And if we ignore our body messages, right? And so all of these things we want to become aware of without shame and guilt, and just call it gathering information if it is something that you're experiencing. All of these things I've talked about this evening are on my resource page. There's the ACEs Too High website for you to take a look at. Healthline.com has a lot of really great information. WeAreCapable.org is a wonderful organization that looks at finding jobs and employment for people who have a chronic illness while also supporting them with insurance. And oftentimes, especially in these times, work at home. There's a chronic illness trauma studies website that I've listed that also has a lot of really important information about the impact of a long-term chronic illness. So I want to thank you all so much for taking your time to listen this evening. Alicia, I believe, put my information on there, but if not, it is simply NicoleWilliamsCounseling.com. Please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. This is such an important conversation. I'm happy to keep that conversation going if you have questions. And I believe, Alicia, we have a few more minutes if there are any questions you would like to ask.
Yes,
I'm sharing my screen right there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicole. This was great and so many helpful resources for our folks. So I'm excited to share the slides and the packet that you mentioned with everybody once we send this video out and wherever we link it as well. We did have a couple of questions. I know one of the ones that I had was in the last session, we covered a couple of other techniques other than that 3-6 breathing or 2-4 breathing that you mentioned. So can you just remind people what those other sort of calming techniques are?
Absolutely. There's one of my favorite is called progressive muscle relaxation. And Alicia, you can find examples of this either through scripts online, or actually YouTube has wonderful ones where you can actually just lay down and listen to them. But it is activating, contracting, and releasing your muscles in certain groups from head to toe and back again while practicing that breathing. And it just signals to your body to relax those release those stress hormones and relax into the parasympathetic nervous system. Any kind of guided image, which is often like we did with the meditation, is also really helpful. Grounding exercises called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is also extremely helpful. You can find those online, but it is to take a look at your surroundings for about 30 seconds, close your eyes, and verbalize out loud 5 things that you saw, 4 things that you could hear, 3 things that you could feel, 2 things that you can smell, and the last thing that you tasted, which grounds us back to the present. Remember how we talked about our body doesn't know the difference between the memory or the experience. If our body has gone to the memory and we are in our sympathetic nervous system, this will bring us back to present moment.
Great, thank you so much. And I know if folks go back into our first video, you demonstrate some of these and we sort of all do them together. So if you're interested, that's another way to sort of learn it. But you're right, there's several of these are online and great resources for our folks as well. The other question we had is if somebody were seeking out a mental health professional and they don't live in Austin, then where would they go to find somebody that is versed in working with people with chronic illnesses?
It's a great question. There are several different websites out there that particularly look at plugging in what you're looking for. The one that is kind of the old tried and true, it's been around the longest and the most successful, is Psychology Today. And I actually put a link, I looked on my resources, Alicia, and at the end of the slideshow, there's an actual link they can click on for that. What I like about Psychology Today is it lets you be very specific about what you're looking for. Not just your zip code, but it looks like, are you looking for male, female? Are you looking for a person who specializes in chronic illness, the age, or do they work with children, teens, or adults? Do they take insurance? Do they do telehealth, which is important right now? And what modalities they use. So do they do mindfulness and meditation? Do they do CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy? So it's a really quick snapshot, or a snapshot in that. I would also like to mention too that most therapists, which is perfectly acceptable to ask, will give about usually will offer a 20-minute phone consultation or in office to see if they're a good fit. highly encourage everyone to take them up on that. It's important to make sure you have the right fit. They can be wonderfully kind and nice, but if it isn't a good fit, or maybe they don't offer the type of services you're looking for, then it's not necessarily a great support.
I agree. I mean, that tends to be something that all of our folks should consider, that, you know, both your relationship with your therapist or mental health professional and with your doctor, your gastroenterologist, any of your members of your healthcare team, it's a long-term relationship. And so, you know, you want to make sure you've got the right person that you feel really confident and really comfortable in it, confiding in and working with. So I think that's very good advice. You mentioned telehealth. Obviously, this has become a big deal lately. Is how has it been working with folks in telehealth, and should our folks shy away from perhaps those apps like I know we have like Shared Space and or Talkspace and some of those sort of you know, websites where you can do virtual and or text sort of versions of mental health counseling?
That's a great question. I think it's a really personal question as far as what works best for you. Right now, we are in the time of, we're all doing telehealth, you know, virtually. It also depends on the modalities that they're doing. So for example, I do stand tray therapy. I do a lot of trauma-informed yoga in the sessions. That is not really possible to do over telehealth, although we're getting really creative. And so I think it depends on what you're looking for. I think it would be really, the most important things we're looking at is the relationship, what modalities that you feel comfortable with, and if they have experience in chronic illness. I think those would be those three things to really look for. I will say that most therapists, especially if they work with chronic illness, do offer telehealth as an option. And they do that because oftentimes a client, especially if they're in a flare or after a procedure or after hospitalization, are not able to come in. So that is something that even before COVID that I always offered, because things happen with our health.
Yeah, and I think that's really vital for our folks, just because, I mean, there are times where it is more difficult to leave the house, or even you might be hospitalized. And so, you know, being able to still access services while you're not able to leave wherever you are is really key. So I think, you know, the idea of telehealth is certainly really enticing for a lot of our folks. And I think it's great that you're able to sort of convert that in for your clients. So thank you, Nicole, so much. Those were the questions that we had. Available in case some other things come up. So thank you for that. So I want to thank you again for doing both these webinars. Really fantastic information. Like I said, we've already got some really great feedback from folks. They're appreciating it. So that's good. The other thing I will say is, as for finding a mental health professional that's familiar with IBD, there's a concerted effort amongst some of our IBD psychologists from places like Mount Sinai of putting together a registry of folks that are familiar with working with people with IBD. I'm going to find the name of that because it's just fairly new, and so it's not very robust right now, but I'll find that for y'all so you can see it as well. I don't know that we have anybody in Texas registered yet, but we can keep trying. Nicole will get you on there for sure.
Put me on there.
So, but thank you again, Nicole. We want to appreciate it. I also want to say a special thanks to AbbVie and Texas Children's Hospitals, Texas Children's Hospital. It's singular, even though there's multiple hospitals, for sponsoring tonight's webinar. So we want to appreciate them so much for making this webinar possible. So thanks, everyone. Have a great night, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.